I slapped the Mafia boss in public for my friend. He smiled and said, "Finally, someone real." I slapped a man who could make this city tremble. Under the golden lights and the smell of burnt coffee, my hand moved before my mind could stop it. The sound cracked the air like shattering glass, and the world went still. He didn't get angry. He simply tilted his head, a ghost of a smile on his lips. "Finally," he said, his voice soft velvet wrapped in steel, "someone real." Before everything veered off its axis, that night had been ordinary. The Velvet Bean Café was closing, chairs flipped onto tables, the floor damp with cleaner and sugar dust. I'd been at it for 10 hours, my arms sticky with caramel, my eyes raw from the heat. The exhaustion was comforting, a thin blanket smothering thought. Maya Torres, my best friend, stood behind the bar, hands trembling around the last glass she polished. The light carved her face into tired planes, her smile forced, fragile. There was something in her eyes, fear so deep it made the room itself quiet. "Rough night?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. She froze, the glass halfway in her hand, then set it down with a soft clink. "Adrian Voss called," she whispered. The name changed the air. I'd heard it too often. The man the media called a financial prodigy, the underground called a crownless king. He bought and broke companies like toys, and Maya owed him. Not much money, but in Adrian Voss's world, no debt was small. "I'll take more shifts," I said, though even my voice sounded tired. "We'll pay him back." Maya smiled weakly. "You don't pay back Adrian Voss. He doesn't want money, Clara. He wants control." Before I could answer, the doorbell chimed. Ting. A familiar sound turned sharp, final. 3 men entered, and the cafe seemed to shrink. 2 were walls in black suits, eyes dull and heavy. The third, taller, quieter, moved like contained electricity. Street light sliced across his face, every line too perfect, too precise. Adrian Voss. Maya's breath hitched. She stepped back, as if her body knew before her mind. He didn't glance around, just walked toward her, his stride unhurried, inevitable. His men flanked out, sealing off escape. "Miss Torres," he said, voice low, steady, lethal. "We have unfinished business." Maya trembled. "I just need a little more time." "Time," he cut in, "is a luxury, and you've spent yours." He reached inside his jacket and drew out a black velvet pouch, the silver string glinting under the lights. He let it dangle for a second, then with a flick, opened it. A rain of diamonds hit the bar, cold, brilliant, merciless. "This," he said, eyes sliding over Maya, "is the value of your debt, and the value of you." Maya's hands clenched the counter until her knuckles blanched. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. He stood there, tall, calm, cruel, and I realized he was enjoying this. "You're free," he continued, smiling faintly. "Debt cleared, but you're done here. You'll leave the city tonight and never contact anyone again." Maya's tears hit the diamonds, each drop a tiny wound of light. Free, he called it freedom. To me, it sounded like exile. He flicked his wrist. The diamonds rolled off the counter, clattering to the floor like mocking laughter. I don't remember thinking, just the heat, the pressure in my chest, the burning in my palm. I stepped forward, 1 step, 2, and I slapped him. Crack. No one moved, no one breathed. The mark of my hand bloomed red across his cheek. The guards surged forward, but he lifted a hand without looking. They froze. He stood still, only the rise and fall of his chest betraying life. Then he turned his head toward me. Not anger, something deeper, a dark, unsettling curiosity. His smile appeared slowly, spreading from one corner, never reaching his eyes. "Finally," he said, voice low and rough, "someone real." The hum of the coffee machine felt distant, unreal. My hand burned, my heart hammered so hard I thought it might break free. And under the fear, something else stirred. Not bravery, not pride, but the dizzying awareness that for one fleeting moment I mattered. He touched the reddened cheek, eyes still locked on me, dissecting, marking. The space between us hummed like a live wire stretched too tight. Then he turned away. The bell above the door chimed as he left, his bodyguards flowing after him like shadows. The chill that followed carried the scent of expensive cologne and a silent promise of consequence. Maya crumpled onto a stool, sobbing. The manager muttered about closing early. I stood there, surrounded by scattered diamonds, their reflections cutting through the floor like tiny blades of light. I had just done the most reckless thing in my life, and the only thing that ever felt right. I had slapped Adrian Voss, and he had smiled. After he left, the café sank into a thick, suffocating silence. I could still hear his footsteps fading into the night, the doorbell's faint chime lingering like a promise yet to be kept. His cologne hung in the air, sharp and expensive, mixing with burnt coffee and sweat, the scent of something irreversible. Maya collapsed onto a chair, her shoulders trembling. I went to her, laid a hand on her arm, but words refused to come. My palm still burned, and the memory of touching Adrian Voss's skin, the cold heat of power, seared itself into me like a brand. "You're insane," she whispered. "You know who he is, Clara. He won't let that go." I looked at her. Fear swam in her eyes, raw and helpless. "I couldn't just stand there and watch him humiliate you," I said quietly. "No one has the right to do that." She laughed, hollow. "You just slapped a man who could erase an entire city with one phone call." I didn't answer. Deep inside, fear began to bloom, slow and steady, like water creeping up the sides of a glass. I told myself he'd forget, that someone like Adrian Voss had bigger things to worry about than a slap from a café waitress. But I knew better. That night, Maya packed her things with shaking hands. "I'm leaving," she said, voice breaking. "I have to disappear." "I'll come with you," I said. She shook her head. "No, he'll find us both. You have to stay out of this." And then she was gone, swallowed by the wet, neon-soaked darkness. The door shut softly, and I knew that might have been the last time I'd ever see her. When I reached my apartment, it was past midnight. I dropped my bag, kicked off my shoes, and then my phone buzzed. One new message. Unknown number. "Miss Hayes, 7 o'clock in the evening tomorrow. Voss Estate. A car will pick you up. Don't be late. Miss Torres's safety depends on you." The glow from the screen painted my face pale. I read it again and again. The words were clean, precise. No emotion, no threat needed. The threat was in what wasn't said. I tried calling back, blocked. I texted Maya. No response. Again, nothing. I sank into a chair, my knees weak. Streetlight filtered through the blinds, slicing the room into gold and shadow. The silence pressed against my ears. Somewhere between fear and disbelief, I realized this was inevitable. He hadn't forgotten. He'd been waiting. I didn't sleep that night. I made coffee. I didn't drink. Changed clothes twice. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw someone else, a woman whose eyes were too wide, whose pulse lived at her throat. By the next evening, the sky was a bruised gray. I chose a navy blue dress, plain, modest, the The same one I wore to my first interview at the café. Maybe it was foolish, but I wanted to look like myself, even walking into his world. At 6:45, I heard the low hum of an engine outside. A black SUV waited by the curb, lights dimmed, patient. I grabbed my coat, inhaled deeply, and went downstairs. A tall man in a black suit waited by the car. His expression was blank, professional. "Ms. Hayes?" "Yes." He opened the rear door. I stepped inside. The seat was cold, the smell of leather and smoke thick in the air. When the door closed behind me, it sounded like a lock turning. The car moved. The city receded. Blocks of light melting into the rain. No one spoke. Only the rhythmic sound of wipers and the steady pulse of my heartbeat. After nearly an hour, we turned onto a gravel drive. I looked up and saw it, the Voss estate. Glass and stone rose from the dark like a fortress. Light bled through the windows, not warm light, but the glow of power. When I stepped out, the wind off the Hudson cut through my coat. The front doors opened before I reached them. A woman stood waiting, sharp posture, hair in a sleek knot, her black suit impeccable. "Clara Hayes?" "Yes." "I'm Evelyn Cross, Mr. Voss's chief of staff. He's expecting you." Her tone was smooth, professional. Someone long accustomed to fear. My heels clicked softly against marble as I followed her down the hallway, lined with abstract art, colors twisted into shapes that made no sense, but felt like something trapped. At the end, she stopped before a tall oak door. "He's in the library," she said, then added with cool precision, "A word of advice, Ms. Hayes. Be honest. He values that." Before I could respond, she was gone. I pushed the door open. The room was large, lined with books, the scent of leather and smoke in the air. Firelight flickered against glass and shadow. Adrian Voss stood by the window, back to me, perfectly still. "Ms. Hayes," he said, voice calm, even. "Thank you for being on time." And just then I understood. I hadn't been dragged into his world. I'd walked into it, voluntarily. The firelight flickered against walls lined with leather-bound books, painting the room in shades of amber and shadow. It smelled of smoke, paper, and old wealth, the kind of air where power doesn't shout. It hums quietly, absolute. Adrian Voss turned to face me. The flames caught in his storm-gray eyes. He didn't speak at first. The silence between us carried its own weight until I could hear my heartbeat, steady but heavy. "Ms. Hayes," he said finally, his voice low, deliberate. "I must admit, few people have the nerve to look me in the eye. Fewer still dare to touch my face. You managed both in the same evening." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to apologize, but another, fiercer part refused. I held his gaze. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," I said, my voice soft but firm. "But my friend didn't deserve what you did." A faint smirk curved his mouth, sharp as a blade. "You believe you can define what's deserved in this world, Ms. Hayes?" "I believe everyone deserves a measure of respect, even from people like you." He studied me for a moment, then gave a quiet, dangerous laugh. "Strange. Most people beg or stay silent in front of me. You choose to talk." He moved behind the desk and gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." I hesitated, then obeyed. It felt less like sitting and more like being summoned before judgment. He poured a glass of red wine, the light turning it to liquid fire. "You know who I am, don't you?" "I do." "And yet you came here." "For Maya." He nodded slightly. "Loyalty, a rare virtue." He swirled the wine, speaking slowly. "I'm not a monster, Ms. Hayes. I simply return to the world what it gives me, fairness on my terms. Fairness? I let out a dry laugh. If that's your version of it, I doubt anyone survives long enough to enjoy it. A glint of amusement crossed his eyes. Perhaps you're right. Then he stood, walking around the desk. His steps echoed softly, deliberate, each one tightening the air around me. "Do you know why I brought you here?" he asked, his tone dropping to a murmur. "I doubt it's to thank me." He chuckled, genuine this time, though still rough. "No, not to thank you. You've intrigued me, Ms. Hayes. People fear me, flatter me, lie to me. You, on the other hand, slapped me. I met his eyes, because you deserved it." This time he didn't smile. He looked at me for a long time, then said, "I think I've found something money can't buy." My breath caught. "And what's that?" "Something real." He took a step closer. "My world is full of masks, smiles, promises, loyalty, all bought and sold. But you don't want anything. That's why I want you here." "Here? I've cleared your friend's debt. You don't have to worry about her anymore. But debts don't disappear, Ms. Hayes. They shift." I swallowed hard. "To me?" "Exactly." His gaze never wavered. "I need someone who tells the truth. No flattery, no fear. You'll be my personal assistant. You'll live here, in this house." "You talk as if I have a choice." He smiled, slow, unsettling. "Choices always exist. Few people are brave enough to make the hard one." I rose to my feet. "And if I refuse?" He didn't hesitate. "Then Miss Torres will continue to repay me differently." The room seemed to shrink. My heartbeat filled the space where oxygen should have been. I understood then this wasn't an invitation, it was a blood contract. He sipped his wine, eyes already elsewhere. "Your room is on the second floor, east wing. Evelyn will show you." I didn't move. "One more thing," he said without looking up. "I dislike dishonesty. If you plan to run, don't make me come find you. I don't repeat warnings." Evelyn appeared at the door as if conjured by his words. "This way, Ms. Hayes." I followed her down the long corridor. Our footsteps echoed softly on marble, each sound reminding me that every door in this house locked from the inside. She opened a silver key, gestured toward the room. "Your quarters, breakfast at 7. Mr. Voss values punctuality." I nodded, stepping in. The room was elegant, almost sterile. A large window overlooked the Hudson, framed by heavy curtains. I approached the glass, touched the cold surface, and saw my reflection, pale, small, eyes wide, with something between fear and defiance. I had stepped into his world, a fortress of glass and stone, where beauty hid the bars. And the most terrifying part wasn't that I was trapped. It was that deep down, a part of me wasn't sure I wanted to leave. That first night in Adrian Voss's estate, I barely slept. The wind off the Hudson hissed against the windows, the old clock ticking in the hallway, like a slow, patient countdown. When the first light crept past the heavy curtains, I realized how beautiful the room was. Too beautiful, in a way that didn't feel real. The bed was wide, the sheets impossibly soft, the air faintly scented with cedar, but the windows wouldn't open. I tried the latch, pulled, nothing. Beyond the glass, the morning stretched pale and endless, and yet I couldn't touch it. I was in a cage, only this one was wrapped in luxury. A knock came at the door. Before I could answer, it opened. A young woman entered, her uniform black, her expression blank. She carried a silver tray, coffee, pastries, fruit. The smell was warm and comforting, disarmingly human. "Breakfast, Miss Hayes," she said, voice flat, eyes distant. She set the tray down, nodded once, and left without another word. When the door closed, silence filled the room again. I understood then. Everyone in this house moved like clockwork, precise, efficient, emotionless. They were cogs in the quiet machine called Voss. At 7:15 sharp, Evelyn appeared. Her suit was flawless, her face unreadable. "Mr. Voss expects you to begin work today," she said. "The West Library, you'll be organizing and cataloging all archival materials. He despises disorder." "Did he say why he wants me to do it?" Her eyes lifted, sharp as glass. "No one asks why Mr. Voss decides anything. We just do it." The West Library was breathtaking. Endless shelves, thousands of leather-bound books, sunlight drifting through dust motes suspended in still air. It wasn't a room, it was a cathedral built for power. I began sorting through rows of journals and files. Each leather notebook was labeled by year, project, or a name I didn't recognize. Inside, the handwriting was meticulous, cold and perfect. Occasionally, I'd find a line that made me pause. "Profit before virtue." "Loyalty expires." Each phrase felt like a fingerprint of his mind, methodical, unflinching. Around noon, a voice broke the silence. "I don't recall asking anyone to touch those." I turned. Adrian Voss stood in the doorway, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, his sleeves rolled back, the picture of casual control. Light from the window carved him in half. Half shadow, half fire. "I was reorganizing," I said, steadying my voice. He walked closer, slow and deliberate. "Those are my personal journals. People who touch them without permission don't usually get the chance to do it twice." I froze, my hands still hovering over the files. "Then I'll leave them." He stopped beside the desk. "Aren't you afraid, Miss Hayes?" "I am," I admitted, "but fear doesn't change anything." He looked at me for a long moment, and then, for the first time, he smiled. Not mockery, not dominance. Something almost genuine. "You're fascinating," he murmured. Then he turned away. "Continue, I'll know if you read too far." Days passed like that, quiet, meticulous, strange. I worked in the library. He appeared at random, always calm, always watching. His presence filled the air, silent but impossible to ignore. One evening, as sunset bled across the glass walls, he came in again, this time carrying 2 cups of coffee. He set one before me. "I don't like people working for me like machines," he said. "Coffee helps." I took it, the warmth seeping through the porcelain into my fingers. "Thank you. I didn't think you were the kind to care." "Not about employees," he said, eyes fixed on me. "About exceptions." The air thickened, heavy with something unspoken. I didn't know if it was fear or tension or both. After a long silence, I asked softly, "Do you ever feel lonely, Mr. Voss?" He looked up, something flickering behind his eyes. "No one really wants the answer to that." "I do." He watched me, long and unblinking. Then he said, "Yes, but I've learned to make loneliness an ally." He turned away, his tone cooling once more. "Don't forget, this is a place of work. You may live here, but don't mistake that for freedom." The door closed behind him, leaving the echo of his words behind. I sat there, staring at my reflection in the dark glass, pale, small, trapped between 2 worlds. That was when I understood. The cage wasn't made of metal or locks. It was made of comfort, of control disguised as care. And the most dangerous part of all, a small, foolish part of me, was beginning to wonder if I wanted to escape at all. The days that followed moved in a rhythm I couldn't quite define. Not captivity, but not freedom either. I worked, ate, slept, everything on time, down to the minute. Mornings were for the library, afternoons for whatever files Evelyn brought in. And sometimes, between the hours of silence, I would see Adrian Voss walking past, phone in hand, every step measured, like a man who had mapped the world and owned it. One morning, Evelyn arrived early. "Mr. Voss wants to see you in his office," she said, her eyes assessing. The top floor of the mansion felt colder than the rest. Less art, less warmth, all precision. His office stood at the end of the hall, massive doors carved with perfect symmetry. Evelyn knocked twice and opened them. "She's here, sir." "Thank you, Evelyn." His voice was deep, deliberate. He stood behind a blackwood desk scattered with papers and spreadsheets. The air was sharp with focus, the kind of quiet that demanded attention. "You studied accounting, didn't you?" he asked without looking up. "I have a degree," I said cautiously, "but I've never worked at this level." "You will now." He slid a thick folder toward me. "My schedule, investment portfolios, subsidiary ledgers, audit everything. Tell me what's wrong. You have 3 days." I blinked. "You want me to rebuild the financial structure of your empire?" "No, Ms. Hayes," he said, lifting his eyes, gray, cold, and alive. "I want to see how sharp you are." For 3 days, I buried myself in numbers. The files were dense, complicated, a maze of shell companies, mirrored transactions, silent risks. And somewhere inside that chaos, I started to feel something unexpected: purpose. Late nights under a pool of lamplight, pages spread across the table, I caught myself thinking not about fear, but about solutions. I was beginning to understand how he built his empire, and how fragile even power could be. When I walked into his office 3 days later, he was there, sleeves rolled up, shirt slightly creased, head bent over a report. He looked more human like that, dangerously so. "I reviewed your financial network," I said, setting the file down. "You have redundant investments cycling through your own subsidiaries. It looks stable, but it's not. In 6 months, parts of it could collapse." His brows lifted, intrigued. "Show me." I opened the file. Page 12. 4 of your companies are funding the same project through a single intermediary. It's a feedback loop, not growth. You're investing in yourself. He leaned in, scanning the pages. Silence, then a slow nod. "You're right." There was something new in his voice, surprise, maybe even respect. "I didn't hire you to teach me business," he said at last, though softer than before. But no one in my finance division caught this. "Maybe they're too afraid to tell you the truth," I said quietly. "I'm not." He looked up sharply, then smiled, the kind that didn't threaten, only acknowledged. "You're the first person to say that to me and stay standing." "I don't work out of fear, Mr. Voss," I said. "I work for what's right." "Right," he repeated, as if the word was foreign on his tongue. "Interesting concept." When I stood to leave, he said, "Stay." I hesitated. He leaned forward, eyes steady. "If you were me, what would you change?" "I'd stop swallowing smaller companies whole," I said. "You think you're expanding, but you're isolating yourself. Partner with them instead. You'll build loyalty, real loyalty." He didn't answer. The fire cracked softly, shadows shifting across his face. Then he spoke, voice low. "Everyone fears me. No one's ever told me that." "I didn't plan to," I said, "but someone had to." He watched me, the silence between us alive, heavy, charged. Something shifted, not much, but enough. Finally, he placed his pen down. Partnership instead of dominance. You want me to try your way? Yes. A faint smirk tugged at his mouth. I'll try, but if it fails, you'll explain it to the board yourself. I will. He leaned back, studying me like I was both an anomaly and an answer. 10 days, Ms. Hayes. I turned to leave. Ms. Hayes, he called. I stopped. Remember, he said, voice soft but sharp. Intelligence is the most dangerous weapon, especially when you start using it on me. I met his gaze, steady. I'm not using it against you, Mr. Voss. I'm using it to survive you. For a second, he just stared, and then he laughed. A short, genuine sound. Survive, he said. I'm beginning to think you'll do more than that. When the door closed behind me, my pulse was racing. Not from fear this time, from realization. For the first time since I stepped into his world, Adrian Voss wasn't the only one in control. And in his eyes before I left, I saw something undeniable, the beginning of respect. That night, the sky hung heavy over the Hudson, swollen with dark clouds. I was still in the library, the lamplight spilling over unfinished papers, when the first drops of rain began to patter against the glass. The air felt charged, like something invisible was about to break. I closed the file, stood up, and then the lights died. The entire mansion sank into silence and shadow. The hum of electricity vanished, replaced by the raw sound of wind and rain. I froze, heart pounding, waiting for my eyes to adjust. Lightning flashed, slicing across the window, throwing long, shifting shadows of books and shelves. "Evelyn," I called out. No answer. Then thunder cracked, loud enough to shake the glass, and a hand gripped my shoulder, pulling me back. I gasped, the sound trapped in my throat, but then came his voice, low and steady, against my ear. "Don't move, it's just the power." His breath brushed the side of my face, warm against the cool air. I turned, and a bolt of lightning illuminated his face, sharp, beautiful, dangerous. Adrian Voss stood inches away, the storm outside mirrored in his eyes. For a heartbeat, everything stopped, the rain, the fear, even the world. Only his hand on my shoulder, his breath near my skin, and the sound of our pulse filling the silence. Another flash of light. We were close, too close. I could see every line of his face, the faint tension at his jaw, the gleam in his eyes that wasn't quite control anymore. The distance between us was small enough that a single breath could have ended it. "You're scaring me," I whispered. "Good," he said quietly. "Fear means you still understand danger. I don't think you should compare yourself to a storm." "I am the storm," he murmured, and I could hear the faint smile in his voice, the kind of smile that belonged to someone testing how far I'd go before I broke. Lightning struck again, flooding the room with white light. We were face to face now, the air between us thick with heat, with tension, with something neither of us wanted to name. My pulse stumbled. His fingers tightened slightly, as if anchoring me there. Then, like the universe itself stepped in to stop us, his phone rang. The sharp sound shattered the moment. He released me and answered, voice instantly different, colder, clipped. "Report." I couldn't hear the other end, only saw his face harden. "Lock the system," he ordered. "No one leaves, no one enters. I'm coming down." He ended the call and turned to me. "What's happening?" "Security breach," he said curtly. "Someone's trying to access internal files. From outside? Not sure. His gaze pinned me where I stood. From now on, you don't leave the house. My chest tightened. Do you think I have anything to do with it? I don't think, he replied. I protect what's mine. The words hit harder than they should have. I don't belong to anyone, Mr. Voss. Another lightning flash lit his face, his eyes softer now, but darker too, as if something inside him was warring with itself. Believe that if it helps you sleep, he said finally, but if you walk out tonight, I can't promise you'll come back. He left before I could respond, the echo of his steps fading into the corridor, swallowed by the storm. I stood there for a long time, heart still hammering, unsure whether what I felt was fear or something far more dangerous. Outside, thunder rolled again, deep and steady. I went to the window, pressed my palm to the cold glass. My reflection looked back at me, pale, eyes bright, haunted by something I couldn't name. I didn't know which was more terrifying, that he truly could control everything, or that, for a fleeting moment, I'd seen him lose control because of me. The storm raged on. The air smelled of rain and ozone and his cologne, still clinging faintly to my skin. And in that night of darkness and thunder, I realized something that made my breath hitch. I wasn't just living inside Adrian Voss's golden cage anymore. I was standing in the heart of his storm. And the worst part was, I wasn't sure I wanted to find my way out. The next morning, the rain had stopped, but the sky was still the color of lead. The Voss estate felt different, unnaturally still, as if the entire house were holding its breath. Evelyn didn't appear to escort me to work as usual. When I stepped out into the hallway, 2 guards were posted at opposite ends, their eyes sharp, alert. The air felt thick, charged, like static before a storm. From the window on the 2nd floor, I saw several black SUVs parked just outside the iron gates, unmarked, windows tinted, motionless. They didn't move, didn't honk, didn't even flash their lights, yet their presence was enough to make my skin prickle. One of the guards murmured into his earpiece, then glanced up toward me. I turned away quickly, my heart pounding. The phone on the desk rang suddenly, its shrill tone slicing through the silence. I froze, startled. No one had ever called this room before. I picked it up cautiously. Hello? No response, just breathing, slow, steady, unfamiliar. I was about to hang up when a distorted voice came through the static, deep and uneven. Are you Clara Hayes? I stiffened. Who is this? Leave that place before he makes you disappear like the others. I went still. Who are you? The only one among them who doesn't want to see you erased. Then the line went dead, replaced by a hiss of static. I stared at the phone, my pulse racing. Somehow, in that moment, my fear of Adrian Voss felt smaller than the dread curling in my gut. That someone else was watching, that I had unknowingly become a piece in a much larger game. The door opened without warning. I flinched, nearly dropping the phone. Adrian stepped in, tall, composed, dressed in a black shirt, his phone still in hand. His eyes flicked over me, then to the landline. Who just called? His voice was low, sharp as a blade. I don't know. They said I should leave, that you, I hesitated, would make me disappear. His expression shifted, not to anger, but to a kind of cold calculation. When? Just now, they knew my name. He pulled out his phone, tapping quickly. The security system was breached again. Vehicles have been parked outside since dawn. I saw them, I said, stepping toward the window. They've been there all morning. Who are they, Adrian? He was silent for a moment, then answered quietly, "Opposition." "Opposition?" I frowned. "You mean competitors?" "In every sense." He walked closer, voice dropping lower. "People who don't just want my company, they want me destroyed. And now they've found my weakness." I felt a chill crawl down my spine. "Your weakness?" "You, Clara." The air stilled. I needed a full heartbeat to process what he'd said. "You're joking," I managed, with a faint laugh that didn't reach my throat. He didn't smile. His gray eyes caught the faint morning light, gleaming with something raw, unnerving. "You've appeared in their surveillance records, your name, your file, your image, all extracted since the day you arrived. They know I'm protecting you, and that makes you leverage." My fists clenched. "I'm not a commodity." He stepped closer, gaze unyielding. "But to them, you are the only thing that matters." "And to you?" The question escaped before I could stop it. The silence that followed was heavy, alive. His eyes softened for the briefest second, then hardened again. "I don't let anyone touch what's mine," he said softly, almost a whisper. "And that makes them want to even more." I took a step back, my thoughts a tangle of disbelief and fury. "You talk like I'm one of your possessions." "I'm talking about protection," he said, his voice deep, controlled. "And in my world, to protect someone means to own them, whether I want to or not." "Well, I don't want to be owned," I said, my throat tightening. "I'm not a company, not a contract. I'm a person." Silence stretched between us. He looked at me then, and something inside him seemed to shift. Not the ruthless businessman, but the man caught between control and a feeling he couldn't name. "I know," he murmured. "It's because you're human that they chose you." Outside, the wind howled through the cracks of the old windows, the sound haunting and distant. I turned toward the glass, those black vehicles still motionless beyond the gate. A flash of lightning lit our reflections. 2 figures trapped inside the same fortress, only steps apart, but divided by something invisible and cold. "I don't want to be your burden," I whispered. "You're not a burden," he said, eyes fixed on mine. "You're the consequence." The words hit me like a blow. "From the night you walked into that café, I made a choice," he continued, voice low, almost detached. I could have ignored that slap, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that came with it. The first time someone dared to look at me and not be afraid. I gripped the edge of a chair to keep from trembling, and now that feeling has made me bait. He took another step toward me. "No, Clara, you've made me vulnerable, and for a man like me, that's the most dangerous thing there is." I met his gaze, heart racing but steady. "Maybe you should learn to let people matter without having to own them." He let out a quiet laugh, one that sounded more like defeat than amusement. "You say that as if this world allows such mercy. I think you're the one proving that it does." A gust of wind slammed against the window, sending the curtains billowing. We both turned toward the sound. The light from outside flashed across his face, stripping away the mask for a fleeting second, revealing not power, but a man torn between possession and the desperate need to protect. When he turned back to me, his voice was softer, weary. "You'll stay here, whether you want to or not. I won't let them touch you. And if I refuse," his eyes hesitated, "then you'll destroy everything I'm trying to hold together." I wanted to argue, to shatter that cold armor he kept wrapping himself in. But I couldn't. In that instant, I saw it clearly. Between us stood two walls running parallel. One built from fear, the other from a connection neither of us dared to name. Outside, the rain began again. It drummed against the glass, steady, relentless, echoing the rhythm of my heart. In the darkness, beneath the hum of the storm, I realized something undeniable. I was no longer an outsider in this conflict. I had become a target, and worse still, I had become Adrian Voss's weakness. But what frightened me most wasn't that truth. It was that I wasn't sure I wanted to escape it anymore. I didn't know why I agreed to go out that day. Maybe it was pride, the need to prove I wasn't just a bird trapped in Adrian Voss's golden cage. Or maybe I just needed air, even for a few hours. Evelyn told me to deliver a file to one of Voss Group's branch offices in the city. "Just drop it off and come straight back," she said, her tone as detached as ever. The request came through the internal system, authorized, stamped, impossible to question. Adrian didn't know I was leaving, or at least I thought he didn't. The afternoon sky was heavy, fog curling low over the roads. The driver was a stranger, a face so ordinary it was forgettable. I sat in the back, clutching the briefcase tight on my lap. The road cut through the damp suburbs, trees bending in the wind like they were whispering a warning. When we turned onto a darker stretch with no streetlights, I felt it, that sharp prickle of unease. Then it all happened in seconds. A large truck swerved from a side alley, blocking the road. My driver slammed the brakes, tires screeching. The briefcase flew from my hands. Before I could think, the car door was ripped open. Two masked men lunged in. A heavy blow struck my head. Everything went black. There were shouts, a crash, then nothing. When I woke, the world was darkness. My mouth was sealed with tape, my wrists bound tight. Pain throbbed down my arms. The air was thick with the stench of oil and smoke. The engine roared beneath me, steady, relentless. I tried to move, but the restraints cut into my skin, cold and unyielding. I forced myself to breathe. "Control your fear." Adrian's voice echoed in my head, low, deliberate, infuriatingly calm. "Don't let fear lead you. The moment you master it, you survive." I closed my eyes and counted my breaths. 1, 2, 3. Slowly, my pulse steadied. Every jolt of the truck gave me glimpses of my surroundings: metal floor, wooden crates, burlap sacks. At least 2 men sat in front. I could hear them over the hum of the radio. "Voss will pay," one said. "This time he'll come out himself." The other laughed. "As long as the girl's breathing." I clenched my teeth. So I'd been right. I wasn't a victim. I was bait. A small fish meant to lure the biggest predator out of hiding. Fear swelled in my chest, but I forced it down. If Adrian were here, he'd hate to see me panic. He once told me, "Fear is reflex, survival is choice." So I chose to survive. The truck lurched. A sliver of light slipped through the canvas above me, falling across my tied hands, trembling, scraped, streaked with dried blood. I rubbed the rope against a jagged edge of metal, trying to cut through. Each bump made the wire bite deeper, burning my skin, but I kept going. The smell of oil made me dizzy. My head spun. My lungs screamed for air. I leaned back, gasping. Somewhere between the noise and the pain, I heard his voice again, clear as memory. "If anything happens, remember, I won't abandon you." I tightened my fists. I didn't know why, but I believed him. A loud bang echoed from the front. The truck jerked violently. I slammed into a crate, pain flaring down my side. Voices shouted. The rear doors clanged open. flooding the space with harsh white light. One of them grabbed me, yanking me upright. Cold air hit my face like a slap. I blinked against the dark sky, headlights slicing through the rain. "Move," a voice barked. They shoved me out. My legs shook, gravel scraping my knees. The night smelled of rust and wet earth. Ahead, I saw an abandoned warehouse silhouetted against the clouds. That was where they were taking me. Think, Clara, if Adrian was tracking me like he always claimed, he'd know this vehicle went off-grid. He'd come. One of them pushed me again, harder this time. I stumbled and fell, the ground cutting into my palms. I wanted to scream, but the tape silenced me. For a heartbeat, despair almost swallowed me, until I saw, in my mind, those gray eyes, calm, unyielding, already calculating 10 steps ahead. If he said he wouldn't leave me, then he wouldn't. I drew a long breath and forced myself to lift my head. Even bound, even gagged, I stared straight at my captor. No tears, no pleading, just defiance. I only had to hold on a little longer, because somewhere out there, in the growing dark, a man with storm-colored eyes was driving through the night, and he wouldn't stop until he found me. I didn't know how long I'd been inside that warehouse. Light leaked in through the rusted metal roof, catching floating dust like drifting smoke. Every second stretched into an eternity. The air smelled of iron and gasoline, my throat dry and raw. 2 men sat in the corner, talking quietly, their eyes occasionally flicking toward me as if guarding a captured animal. I heard metal clinking, guns. A sound came from far away, faint, like wind seeping through a crack. They didn't notice, but I did. It came again, closer this time. Then, bang, a bullet tore through the sheet metal, sending debris raining down. One of them jumped up, shouting something in Italian. Before he could react, a flash of light flared outside. Gunfire erupted. The echo of bullets ripped through the hollow walls, deafening until all I could hear was a high-pitched ring. The door burst open, smoke and steel filled the air, and through the haze I saw him, Adrian Voss. His black shirt streaked with blood and dust, his face carved in stone, eyes burning gray like lightning. He moved with precision, every step controlled, every motion lethal, a dark god descending. The kidnappers fired wildly. Adrian ducked behind a crate, then returned fire. 2 clean shots. Bodies hit the ground. Silence followed, thick and ringing. As the smoke thinned, he stepped toward me. Headlights from outside framed him in pale light. I wanted to speak, but the tape still sealed my mouth. He knelt, hands trembling slightly, as he tore it away, then cut the ropes with a small blade. "Clara," he said, voice low, hoarse, shaking. "Can you hear me?" I nodded, my throat too tight to answer. His blood-stained fingers brushed my cheek, a touch so gentle it almost broke me. "You're safe now," he whispered. "You'll be fine, I promise." In that moment, he wasn't the cold, untouchable man who commanded empires. He was just a man, drenched in sweat, fear written across his face, fighting the tremor in his hands. "I knew you'd come," I whispered. His lips twitched into a small, tired smile. "I never leave anyone behind." He lifted me easily into his arms, firm but careful. The smell of gunpowder and sweat clung to him, sharp and human. I rested my head against his chest, feeling the steady thunder of his heartbeat. Outside, rain began to fall, steady, cold, as if the world itself was trying to wash away the blood. He set me in the back seat of the SUV. The cabin light glowed soft and warm, in stark contrast to the ruin outside. One of his men took the wheel while Adrian sat beside me, his hand wrapped tightly around mine. He didn't speak. His body was rigid, but his breathing, slow, heavy, filled the silence. Neither of us spoke on the drive back, only the rain tapping against the glass and the low hum of the engine. I glanced at him under the dim light, the sharp line of his jaw, the dried blood on his collar, the shadows beneath his eyes. He stared straight ahead, yet his thumb traced slow, unconscious circles over my hand, as if needing to feel I was still there. In that silence, I realized there were two people inside him: the ruler, cold, controlled, merciless, and the man, the one who had driven through the storm to drag me out of hell. The man whose hands trembled when they touched my face, who looked at me like losing me would end him. I leaned my head against his shoulder. He didn't move, but his breath deepened, steady as the rain outside. Lightning flickered across the windows, bathing us in flashes of white. As the car turned down the long road to the estate, I whispered, "You can rest now." His voice was low, rough, almost a confession. "I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I still see you in their hands." I said nothing. Outside, the streetlights blurred into streaks of gold across the window pane. In that quiet, in that fragile rhythm of breath and storm, I realized something I couldn't take back. Whether he was demon or savior, I no longer knew. Because even as I feared him, I no longer wanted to be anywhere else. By the time the car rolled back into the estate, dawn was breaking. Headlights swept across the wet stone walls, glistening with rain. I was barely conscious, my body heavy and cold, but I felt Adrian's hand steady on my back as he lifted me from the car, gentle yet firm, as if he feared that if I stopped breathing for even a second, he might fall apart. Evelyn and several staff rushed out. No one asked questions. They saw the blood on his shirt, the pallor of my face, and simply let us inside. A private doctor was already waiting, his case open on the table. The light was harsh and sterile, reflecting off gauze and metal. I sat down shivering. "You're safe," Adrian said quietly, his voice rough and low. "You're safe now." As the doctor examined the wound on my temple, I saw Adrian standing a few feet away, eyes fixed on me. His wrists were still streaked with dried blood, his knuckles swollen from gripping his weapon too hard. He didn't seem to notice. He only watched me, as if every breath I took somehow belonged to him. When the bandages were done, the doctor murmured something about mild concussion. Adrian nodded and motioned for everyone to leave. The door closed. Silence pressed in. I could hear the rain outside, steady and heavy, like a second heartbeat. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I shouldn't have gone out without telling you." He didn't answer right away. His eyes locked on mine, cold and unreadable, until finally his voice broke the air. Steel against air. "They'll pay for this, every single one of them who touched you." I froze. The tone wasn't anger, it was verdict. "Adrian," I began softly. He turned, his eyes flashing with something fierce and hollow. "You think I'll let this pass? I warned them. They crossed a line." "You can't keep doing this," I said. "If you strike back, they'll only hit harder. It never ends." "No," he said sharply, voice low but cutting. "It ends when they remember fear. Fear is the only thing that keeps this world in order." The words chilled me. For a moment, I saw him again. The man the world feared. The untouchable empire in human form. but I also remembered the same man holding me hours ago, trembling like someone who'd almost lost the only thing that mattered. Two halves of the same being, the demon and the man, locked in quiet war. A knock at the door broke the silence. One of his lieutenants stepped in, dressed in a dark suit, posture rigid. "Sir, we've identified the attackers. They're Farron's men. What are your orders?" Adrian didn't look up. "Take care of it." The man nodded, then hesitated. "And his family, sir, the wife and 2 children, they live in the southern estate. Leaving them alive could be a risk." Time seemed to stop. I looked up, heart hammering. Adrian stayed silent, staring into the fire. Then, after a long pause, he spoke, his voice rough but deliberate. "No, not them." The man blinked, uncertain. "Sir?" I said no, Adrian repeated, firmer this time. "Only those directly involved. Leave the rest." "But sir, that's not—" "Leave," Adrian said, and though his tone was calm, it carried the weight of command that could crush bone. The man bowed and exited without another word. The room was quiet again, filled only with the crackle of firewood. I turned to him, my chest tight with something I couldn't name. "You spared them," I said softly. "You've never done that before, have you?" He didn't look at me. I don't know why I did. I rose and walked closer, the flickering firelight tracing the lines of his face. The usual cold gleam in his eyes had fractured, replaced by exhaustion and a fragile kind of warmth. "Maybe," I said slowly, "you're starting to believe the world can exist on more than fear." He gave a faint, weary smile. "You think I've changed because of one woman?" "I think you've changed because, for the first time, you feel something." He met my gaze, and in that moment, the space between us disappeared. I understood. What he feared most wasn't his enemies. It was the part of himself waking up inside him, the human part he'd buried for years beneath power and blood. I laid my hand gently over his. He didn't pull away. The firelight reflected off the dried blood on his skin, turning it into something almost luminous, both beautiful and broken. "You're not weaker for having mercy," I whispered. "You're just finally human again." He didn't reply, just looked at me, long, searching, as if trying to understand a language he hadn't spoken in years. Then he murmured, almost to himself, "If being human means risking losing you, I'm not sure I want it." My heart clenched, but I said nothing. I simply held his hand tighter, anchoring him there, keeping him from slipping back into the abyss he'd built around himself. Outside, the first light of morning crept through the curtains. It touched the faint smoke rising from the fireplace, painting the air gold. Adrian sat still, eyes distant, and I knew something irreversible had shifted, not just in him, but in both of us. In the heart of power's darkness, a crack had formed, and through that crack, something fragile and blinding had begun to shine. The first trembling light of a soul rediscovering its humanity. For days after, the house moved quietly around us, as if even the walls knew something had changed. And when the night finally came, he came too. The dawn of that day faded into a still, heavy afternoon. After our talk, Adrian left the room, and silence settled like a weight too dense to lift. I sat for a long time by the window, watching the fractured light scatter across the lake in the distance. The mansion grew dim, the ticking of the clock filling the air. A quiet reminder that even when everything stops, time keeps moving. Night fell quickly, wrapping the world in shadow. I couldn't sleep. Memories came in waves, the gunfire in the warehouse, his arms around me, his voice promising, "You'll be fine, I promise." I told myself it was only the echo of fear, but deep down, I knew it wasn't fear anymore. The door creaked open, soft but startling in the silence. I turned. Adrian stood there, his silhouette cutting through the silver light, spilling from the window. He wore a black shirt, the top buttons undone, dried blood still faint on his sleeves. His eyes weren't cold tonight. They glowed faintly, like something alive behind the storm. "Did I wake you?" he asked quietly. I shook my head, pulling the blanket closer. "You never knock." A faint smile ghosted across his lips. "I was afraid if I did, you wouldn't let me in." He stepped closer. The scent of his cologne lingered. Smoke, leather, and something uniquely him. Something restless. He stopped a few steps away, the moonlight glinting in his eyes. "I couldn't sleep," he said. "There's something I have to tell you, or I won't breathe right again." I swallowed, heart pounding. "What is it?" He lowered his head slightly, his voice rough, fragile in its honesty. "I was afraid." I blinked. "What did you say?" "I was afraid," he repeated, eyes steady on mine. For the first time in my life. The words froze the air between us. "Afraid of what?" I whispered. He moved closer, close enough that I could see the flicker of light in his eyes. "Afraid of losing you," he said softly, his voice trembling the slightest bit. "I never knew that feeling. Before you, I thought life was about owning, controlling. But the night they took you, I stopped being myself." I couldn't speak. I just looked at him, the man who had built an empire on fear, now confessing that he knew what it meant to shake. "I don't want to feel it," he went on, "but you made me human again. And that's the most terrifying thing of all." Tears burned at the corners of my eyes. "You shouldn't say this," I whispered. "I don't know what to believe anymore." "I don't need you to believe," he said quietly. "I just need you to know." I drew in a shaky breath. "You locked me up, Adrian. You turned my world into a cage. And now you say this. Do you know how much it breaks me?" He didn't flinch. He sat on the edge of the bed, close enough for our breaths to mingle. "I know," he said, "and I wouldn't blame you for hating me. But if you feel anything at all, I need you to understand. I never meant to hurt you. I just didn't know how to keep you without breaking something." I closed my eyes. "I hate this," I said softly. "I hate that I fear you and still wait for you. I hate that when you walk in, I can't look away." A faint, broken smile tugged at his mouth. "Then we're the same," he murmured, both afraid, both unable to stop. The silence stretched thin between us. His gaze held mine, stripped of power, stripped of armor, just him, raw and human. He lifted a hand, brushing my cheek with trembling fingers. I didn't move. His breath warmed my skin. "I don't deserve this," he whispered. "I never wanted someone who did," I said. "I just wanted this to be real." The space between us disappeared. The kiss came softly, hesitant, trembling, but real enough to stop the world. There was no rain, no fear, only the rhythm of two heartbeats colliding in fragile defiance. When he pulled away, I kept my eyes closed. His voice came low, rough, almost breaking. "Thank you for making me afraid. Without you, I'd never have known I still had a heart to fear with." I opened my eyes and looked at him, the man who had once been my captor, and knew that in that instant the balance had shifted. Power had knelt before emotion, and the darkness itself had learned how to breathe. After that kiss, The distance between us vanished, yet the silence grew deeper than ever. It wasn't the silence of fear or hatred anymore, but something heavy and tender. The kind of quiet where two people listen to their own hearts just to be sure they're still beating. Outside, the rain had stopped. Moonlight slipped through the window, tracing ribbons of silver across the floor. I could still feel Adrian's breath on my skin, mixed with oak, smoke, and something distinctly his. The scent of a man, standing between sin and salvation. He sat in stillness for a long moment, eyes fixed on me. In those gray eyes burned a conflict, the desire to hold on and the need to let go. "Clara," he said softly, voice low as wind. "You can still leave." I turned to him. "Leave?" "Yes." He swallowed, as though each word cost him something. "I told you I'd give you your freedom, and I meant it. If you want to go in the morning, the doors will be open. My people will take you anywhere you wish. No one will ever touch you again." I stared at him, unable to speak. The man who once caged me now handed me the key to my own freedom. But what hurt wasn't the choice, it was the ache in his voice as he said it. "Why does it sound like punishment when you say it?" I asked quietly. "Because I know," he replied, eyes never leaving mine. "Keeping you means imprisoning what I respect most, and if I truly want to be human again, I have to learn to let you go." I stood and crossed the room. Moonlight washed over his face, the face of a man who once ruled through fear, now waiting for judgment from the very person he'd once chained. "I'm not running," I said. My voice trembled, but not from fear. "I choose to stay." His eyes flickered. "Clara?" "I choose the light," I continued, stepping closer. "The light that exists in your darkness." He didn't speak. His hand found mine, warm now, no longer the cold hand of control but of surrender. "Do you know what staying means?" he asked. "It means walking into a world where every choice costs blood." "I know," I said, "but if I leave, the darkness still stays with you. I just choose not to let you face it alone." Something cracked in his expression. Not tears, but a quiet collapse, a surrender. That night, there were no vows, no rings, no ceremony. Just two people, the captor and the captive, stepping toward each other in fragile light. From that moment, what bound us wasn't power or fear, but a pact, silent, equal, fragile. A promise forged not in dominance, but in understanding. Days passed. Adrian began to let me into his world. At first, it was small things, reviewing documents, checking contracts. But gradually, he began asking for my opinion before major deals. I wasn't hidden from his empire anymore. I had become part of it, and I watched him change. In meetings, his tone remained sharp, commanding, but sometimes, when smaller companies were mentioned, he paused. His eyes would flicker toward me, a silent reminder that not all the weak deserved to be crushed. Even Evelyn, his calm, measured assistant, noticed. Once, as I was sorting through files in the library, she said quietly, "I've worked for Mr. Voss for 13 years. This is the first time I've seen him listen." I looked up. "Do you think that's good or bad?" She smiled faintly. "I think that's what keeps him human." The words lingered with me for days. At night, I often found Adrian standing by the window, staring into the garden. He wasn't darkness anymore. He was twilight, caught between light and shadow. I would walk up, place my hand on his shoulder. He'd turn, offering one of those rare, tired smiles. "You're not afraid anymore?" he asked one evening. "I still am," I admitted, but not of you. I'm afraid you'll forget why we're still here." He squeezed my hand gently. "I won't, because the night you chose to stay, I learned my power isn't a weapon anymore. It's a promise, and I'll keep it, even in the dark." Outside, the wind stirred the trees, carrying the scent of earth after rain. I rested my head against his shoulder, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. In the darkness, I felt no fear, because I knew I had chosen right, not to stay because he needed me, but because we both needed to believe that even in the deepest dark, light could still be made. Time passed faster than I expected. Winter melted away, and with it, the invisible frost that once clung to the mansion. The place that had been a fortress of power and fear began to breathe again. The lights no longer felt cold. They glowed softly, reflecting off the stone walls like a pulse slowly returning. The staff no longer avoided Adrian's gaze. When they greeted me, it wasn't with fear, but with genuine respect. They called me Ms. Hayes, sometimes Ms. Clara, and smiled when they said it. Somehow, my presence had shifted the air. The silence wasn't suffocating anymore. It was peaceful. Adrian had changed, too. He was still powerful, still sharp, but there was restraint in his voice now. A quiet consideration that hadn't been there before. As if every decision he made was weighed not only with logic, but with conscience. I still remembered that first morning he brought me into a board meeting. Every head turned when I entered, doubt flickering in their eyes. But Adrian's voice silenced them instantly. "From now on," he said, "when she speaks, it's as if I've spoken." No one argued, no one dared. But later, when our eyes met, he smiled slightly, the kind of smile that said even kings could learn to share their thrones. We worked side by side. I proposed partnerships instead of acquisitions, collaboration instead of conquest. He listened, truly listened, and when he did, his empire began to change. People started to talk about Voss Group differently. It was still powerful, still feared, but no longer ruthless. It had, as one journalist put it, found a pulse. One morning, sunlight poured through the library windows as I worked over a stack of notes. The scent of coffee filled the air. Adrian entered quietly, wearing a white shirt, sleeves rolled up, a rare calm on his face. He set a cup down in front of me. "Just the way you like it," he said. I smiled, fingers curling around the warmth. The light caught the dark surface of the coffee, glinting like glass. Everything felt impossibly still, peaceful, as if the man before me had never been a monster at all. He stood there for a while, watching me, and then said softly, "You know, the day you slapped me, I thought finally someone real." I looked up, surprised, then smiled. "And so were you." He laughed, quiet but genuine, and in that light, he didn't look like the man the world feared. He just looked like someone who had finally found peace. We stood by the window, side by side, watching the garden bathed in morning gold. Our shadows blended on the wall, light and darkness intertwined until they became one. The world outside still ran on power and greed, but within these walls, something new had been born. Not dominance, not submission, but balance. Months later, I left the estate early one morning. Adrian raised an eyebrow. "Off somewhere alone again?" I smiled. "Not exactly." When he asked why, I only said, "You'll understand soon." Weeks later, the Velvet Bean Café reopened, the same little café where everything had begun. But this time it was brighter, warmer. The glass gleamed, The air smelled of roasted beans, and beneath the old sign hung a new line, Clara Hayes & Co. No one knew who & Co. was, only we did. On the opening day, I stood behind the counter, the scent of fresh coffee filling the air. Through the window, I saw a black car across the street. Adrian leaned against it, not coming in, just watching, quietly. I smiled, raised my cup slightly in his direction. He nodded once, the faintest hint of pride in his eyes. The city pulsed around me, alive with sound and light. I wasn't the girl from the Velvet Bean anymore, nor the prisoner of Adrian Voss. I was something else entirely, a woman who had walked through darkness and refused to be consumed. When night fell, the reflections of New York shimmered across the window, bathing my face in gold. I whispered the truth I had carried with me all along, the truth that had kept me standing beside him and not beneath him. I didn't escape the darkness, I learned to shine within it.